Good evening, everyone, and welcome to webinar of data mapping, nuances of data mapping for DPDPA compliance. Uh, so I have my colleague Himanshu, my industry colleague, I would say Himanshu, with me. We are also expecting Supratim to join. Supratim is running a little bit late, but just in the interest of time, as many of you would have joined for this session, we thought we'll begin with the session, and when Supratim comes in, we'll take his inputs as well. So, just to give you a brief introduction about myself before I hand it over to Himanshu for his introduction, I lead a data privacy team at MNG Global Services. I lead the first line of defense team at MNG Global Services. And my entire career, majorly for last 10, 12 years, has been focused on data protection and data privacy. Have worked with one of the biggest IT service provider in India, worked with multiple banking organizations, and currently also am in a financial organization. So I have dealt with a lot of personal data, which is and was under jurisdiction of UK, and going forward, how the India DPDPA Act will impact us. I think this session will be helpful for all of us. So yeah, that's a brief about myself. I'll hand it over to Himanshu for his introduction.
Thank you, Mohit. This is Himanshu. I'm the founder and the CEO of GoTrust. I've been in the industry for last 15 years. I've been on the technical side, being CTO, CIO for multiple countries within Europe. So I've seen the GDPR going live in front of me, how the industries have changed, what challenges GDPR brought in. Being CTO, CIO, I saw all the complexities of the world which came up, and from there the idea came in to come up with GoTrust, which will be helping Indian businesses how they can cope up with DPDPA and while it's coming in, and therefore this product is going to help our industry, and this will be one of the kind product which is made in India for the Indian community, and definitely it will go worldwide. But yeah, step by step. Thank you, Mohit. Back to you.
Great, thanks, Himanshu. So I'm moderating the session, and until Supratim joins in, I think Himanshu will be on line of questions, and I'm sure Himanshu is capable to handle all the questions that we throw at him. We also have a comment section. If you have any questions, you can post in comment section, and the team in the background will surely put it forward to us, and we can take the questions as and when or at the end of the session. So yes, without further ado, we'll just walk through the agenda of the session today. So as the if you can move on to the next slide, thanks. As the topic suggested, this is an overview of key focus on data mapping. How DPDPA has come up with data mapping, the overall understanding of it, the benefits that we have around data mapping, and as we have Himanshu here, what GoTrust would be providing us as a tool. How it can support organizations, various organizations in the industry, to help us comply with this data mapping requirement that we are expecting to come up once the rules are also available. So Himanshu, I think if we can start with an overview, a brief overview. I think in the industry everybody has gone through GDPR and understands ROPA. I'm taking that perception, presumption. But yes, if you can provide a brief overview, what is data mapping, and how it relates to us known ROPAs in the industry right now.
Okay. No, perfect. So,
Yeah.
I would like to first explain a bit on Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which
Okay.
was uh, introduced in 2023, and we are expecting that it will become very soon. It will be part of the legal framework anytime soon, maybe this year or maybe a couple of months from now. Uh, so what's happening in this industry after this law has came up or act has come up, let's put like that, is all the personal data which is being processed in India, whether the company is registered in India or not, will come under the this act basically. Hence, you have to have very clear understanding of data mapping, which data is processed and where it is being processed. So we'll go step by step on this part. The data mapping part first. What is data mapping, right? Because that's the first question that comes into play. Basically, what is this data mapping? So I'm going to read the the line basically, which is which will explain it in more clarity. Is data mapping is a process of connecting a data field from one source to a data field in another source. You know, so what does this mean? This means is if you have a company where you have marketing data, where you have your own digital cloud running with data lakes, so you'll have a lot of personal data in different pockets. So what data mapping does is it connects all the dots and creates a map for you that within your ecosystem of uh, the, let's say, the landscape, technology landscape, where in which entities have personal data. And that's the base. Let me put like that. That's the one of the basics and the most simplest form I can explain what data mapping is in this perspective. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Himanshu. I think that provides a context. So now, you know, uh, GDPR also had a requirement, or ROPA, and again, I know I'm taking a lot of presumptions. There are organizations who are preparing for or being compliant to DPDPA, and they are taking, some leads from GDPR. So if somebody is already compliant, has ROPAs, what do you think is would be the key data or key differentiator when it comes to data mapping?
So being compliance, that means they they either they have they're compliant, they have followed all the processes of GDPR. Basically, that means they have done the data mapping practice, but it depends upon how they have executed this process. So there is a way, like in the past we used to do, was we used to fill the form. There's an Excel, and then based on the best knowledge, we used to fill it. That's
Yeah,
more manual, more assumption based practice. With the data mapping, wherein our data discovery tool plugs into the system, it gives you the real picture, or the, let's say, the actual picture, which most of the time our customers get surprised that, okay, there is another pocket, a silo which nobody was looking into, and there is also a certain aspect of personal data is there. And we also need to understand that a data itself might not be a personal, and after it is connected with three different entities, it becomes personal. So a credit card number might not have any value, but as soon as attached to your name or the date of birth, it becomes personal data. So that's the key. That's a differentiating factor what data mapping brings in versus the old techniques where we used to just fill the form and say, okay, what data we have. Yeah,
yeah, great, great. Thanks, Himanshu. I would want this to be an interactive session. I know we are on a live, but yeah, if audience has any questions, as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to post those questions, and we'll take it up as it comes. Or we can ask questions as well as we go along.
sure.
So moving along, Himanshu, that sets a context of data mapping. But as the next part, if you can explain, what will be the benefits of data mapping for an organization? So we do have if you can move on to the next slide, Asha.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can
Uh,
take us along
sure.
this and explain benefits of data mapping for an organization, a big financial organization, or a significant fiduciary, as we are going to call it going forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's very interesting the word you use fiduciary because in GDPR and DPDPA, in GDPR we call it data controller, and in
Yeah,
GDPR and sorry, and in DPDPA we call it data fiduciary. So it's very interesting that same data subject and two different type of nomenclatures. So whether you call it data controller, data fiduciary, doesn't matter. But what the benefits that data mapping is going to bring in is at multiple levels. Let me put it like this. So, if we talk about data mapping in the context of privacy and data protection, no, because data mapping in technical terms goes beyond privacy. It goes to security. It goes to it go in IT, and it goes to a lot of different terminology. Even in law, it goes for multiple different aspects in it. But I'm going to answer it based on privacy and data protection. Data mapping offers an essential tool for understanding what company collects, what type of data company collects, how it uses it, and where it resides, means, and where it stores. So, for example, a company is selling you something. So, question is, if company sells A, what kind of information it needs to sell you that data or sell you that product? Then second part comes is how it's going to use it. If let's say company needed your personal data, your name or your date of birth, and then how will it going to use it? What it's going to do with the data? And third thing is where it's going to reside. The data is what where the data will be stored, in which servers, in which storage, where they are located. So those are the three key understandings which company has to businesses have to understand before they start using it. And if you take it to the next step, transform it to the next step, how the companies will benefit from it is compliance, basically, because DPDPA Act is there and very soon it will become the law. So they will get compliant directly, basically, with the law. They can deal with the data principal rights, basically. So DSR will come into picture very soon, and in India, I know we are the biggest in population, so a lot of DSR requests will come in if you are in a big company. So that will help you very smoothly to act upon those requests. DSR is data subject request. Swift interactions with the data protection board. So of course, if you're compliant, you can answer and reply to the data protection board very easily. So there'll be not much back and forth. There's very clear actionable data is available within our platform, so it can be used directly. Transparency is there because there is a direct view of the data and the data mapping is available. So you have very clear overview about where the data is, which systems or which process are using it, basically. So you can also take an action upfront if certain processes are getting data which is either they're not using it or it's just there because there was an old API integration or something was there, and so data was already passed on but it's not used. So you can very easily take an action on it. Or sometimes what happens is there are multiple products companies are selling, but it's still the processes are still on, they are not switched off. So that can also help a lot with data, with the transparency thing. So you can just take that actions. And of course, last not the least, when everything is related to the risk, so this helps you a lot with the risk mitigation for the company itself, basically, in general. So those are the five areas, basically, where the data mapping is helping businesses to succeed, basically. Yeah, thanks, Mohit.
Yep. Thanks, Himanshu. I think those are the key pillars that organizations would need to focus on to make sure they demonstrate compliance to as and when a board is set up for DPDPA. Yeah, thanks. So moving on next, we have touched upon compliance. Now, how would how are you expecting that we would go about filling the if you get yeah roadmap for the entire data mapping? How would you? I would say, what are the key aspects that we are covering, and if you can touch upon all the key aspects and why these are required while we are doing data mapping.
So there are a few questions coming in. Mohit, will you like to take them first before we move on?
Sure. Let's take the question. So I think one of the question is, will DPDPA apply if a company doesn't have a server in India and processes or stores data in the US servers for a short period of time?
It applies.
So this is more
Answer is
from
yes.
a localization perspective,
But
Himanshu.
simple answer is yes. Sorry to say, but yes, it applies. So that's challenge. But yeah, that's how the DPDP Act is designed, basically. So yeah. S- Mohit, the second one, or I could take it the second one also. Does data mapping includes making data flow sets, or does this also includes making an inventory of assets? Yes. So data mapping, we're going to discuss about this one in the next step, where we explain what are the steps within data mapping are, basically. So if there are
Yeah,
any further questions, guys, please ask so that we can move to the next step. Yeah. I think
I think we
we can
should
move on. Yeah.
move forward, Himanshu. So if you can explain the roadmap for data mapping, and we'll take the questions at a later point in time. Yeah.
Okay. I think roadmap for data mapping has a couple of steps. So on the high level, it looks very simple, like we're going to explain to you, but technically when we work on it, it's very critical and challenging because it's defining the PI PIIs is the most important step. So step one is define personal data. So what is a personal data basically? So identify both objective name, phone numbers, IP address, subjective data. So like I explained in my discussions that a number of 16 digit might be a number, but as soon as it is linked with a name or date of birth, it becomes relevant. That might be a credit card number. So defining your business, within your business, what is a PII? It's the key. Okay, and once you define that, then the catalog system starts basically. And then what does cataloging means here is determining the type and categories of personal data collected, including structured and unstructured data. So what cataloging means here is, so once you have identified the PIIs, so cataloging starts in the categories. Okay, the name, number, in which structure. So the funny part happens, like Aadhaar card number is there. How it is, if it is a structured table, then you know you have data in very structured format, so there's no problem. But if it's unstructured, let's say there's a letter, and in that letter somewhere it's written Aadhaar number. So those are the catalogs which is prepared, that which type of tables, data sets have these PIIs, and that catalog is created. So data catalog is created, that how many different type of PIIs are in your systems and where. Third step is locate data storage. So it might be the storage system within your ecosystem, can be a table, can be an Excel, can be a marketing. So let's say you guys use MailChimp, or you guys are using third party mass mailing marketing tech tools. So that is also comes under the preview of DPDPA. So that data which is on the third party server also needs to be connected to GoTrust platform. So and then the complete map, or let's say, is created, which trace data flow. So map of the data journey from collection through the internal department to extend vendors, document handlers at each stage. So what happens is, once the data is located, and then there is a view, let's say a map view is created, which will help you to understand, okay, what type of data is stored in which uh, database or third party or vendor, depending upon your situation where you are in. And it also very interestingly, also we try to map is the flow of the data. Normally it's very complex, that where the data started, how the data is processed, what data has become now. So it's challenging task, but we also try to come up with that flow, that give you the direction of the data flow. But yeah, the map is created for sure. And then we then talk about the last step is about giving it back to you, where you then understand, okay, who's the data owner and what's the retention period of that data is basically. So uh, what does this mean is, sometimes we find data is of customers which are in the system for x amount of years, and the contract you have signed is pushing you to remove the data for 2 years or 3 years down the line, or maybe 16 years down the line, depending upon the law act which is applicable on your intercompany. So when I was working in Europe, we used to have the banking data. I worked a lot for the bank, and then the rule was that first level data will be removed in 18 months, but the bank has to hold the data for 6 years for the fraud and other purposes. So then the storage or the localization of the data was very important, that who has access to what data and in which field. So if you go back, then of course there is certain data which is available for 6 years, but okay, with the data flow you will see, okay, where it is. Then you go back one step, you say, look, then you see, okay, locate the data. Okay, this data is in certain departments, certain databases, which is only accessible for archives. And then you go back one step, you always see, okay, this data was personal data, and this was part of the PII which was defined. So this is the triangle, this is how it is created basically, the whole map is there. So that's, and then after 6 years, the data was deleted from that archives basically. So we used to also audit, we means our auditing company used to also audit that the archiving process is in place or not. Can be manual, can be automated, but yeah, with GDPR, we have seen it all, and hence it will come to us also. So both the processes are possible, and then we are basically executing it. So back to
Yeah,
you, Mohit. Yeah.
great. Thanks for that, Himanshu. I think we have another question. Again, everybody's curious how DPDPA uh, is in line with GDPR. I think not the right term, but yes, how it is overlapping. And the exact question is how will how will be okay I think they want to ask how will we create a data map since DPDPA has no provision for ROPA.
So I think, in my understanding, in how GoTrust is defined is, we are you have to have policy. There's a policy module in it that, so you create a policies, and with the policy you create, after the policy you create ROPA, record of processing activities, because you need to understand what the process is, what the structure of the company is. It's more of an interview, but it doesn't matter whether you do the interview with your customers or internal stakeholders. We record the ROPA, and with the ROPA basically comes, the let's say, not the data mapping, but with the ROPA comes the information about the organization, about the structure of the company, and what data is stored in which departments. So that's the one part which is done manually. So that's the one way which we achieve data map. Other way is we have a data discovery module, which plugs in into your database, and this data discovery module directly does the data mapping as soon as you have defined PIAs. Basically, as soon as step one is done, personal data is defined. What data discovery does is, it does the cataloging automatically for you. Then it also does the data storage, location, basically where it stores and creates data flows basically. So there's two ways how we approach. One is the manual, where you have ROPA. One of the ways to do so. Other way around is using the automation side. But yeah, so on the reality side, automation is always 80-25% accurate. Last 15 to 20%, you always need to have a human eyes to validate it and get it validated. And there, the ROPA helps, because ROPA has the human inputs, and then with the digital input, you just map it on each other, and then you have very good output basically. Yeah,
Yeah,
back to you, Mohit.
thanks, Himanshu. Just to add on to what Himanshu mentioned and to answer the question that was asked. Yes, there are still rules that are to be published, whether requirements of ROPA will come through in DPDPA or not. But again, to comply with any data protection law across the globe, I think knowing where your data exists is a very key requirement. While you're conducting various assessments or if you're managing an incident, until unless you have that visibility of how data exists in the organization, I think it'll be very difficult for any particular organization to manage these nuances. So irrespective, it is a good practice, and it is in general advised to have a, a record of processing activity. As the name states, you should know what all data is there in the organization and where all it is stored. Okay, as we move forward, Himanshu, let's talk more about GoTrust, and as you have called out, so if you can provide some use case scenario or approaches how GoTrust has helped an organization, and how does it link with various internal tools like CRM tools or erstwhile banking tools that are available, green screens or IBM mainframe screens that are available. How does it link? Can it pull data directly to create um, data maps or things like that? Any use cases that you want to explain to all our audiences?
So, one very simple use case, and I like simplicity.
Yeah.
So, one very simple use case is the GoTrust is already connected with AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure Cloud. And most of the, when I say these, they are the most famous one. It's also connected with the Snowflake and you name it. So we have those connections already available, pre-built. So for our customers, it is configuration settings. They don't have to do any development. So they come to us, or we sit together. We just add the credentials, and then it's live. That's how easy it is. Number one. Then you get the access to the infrastructure. But as soon as you enter the infrastructure, you will see different type of data structures, databases. One can be structured, Postgres, SQL, all those kind of databases, or it can be unstructured, like MongoDB, where you store, or can be S3, where you stored all your emails, letters, everything. So that's the one part. It also is connected to, today it is already connected with Microsoft 365. What does that mean is, it can scan all the emails, it can scan OneDrive, it can scan Teams chats on the Teams. uh, and now as we speak, we are working on connecting it with Google Workspace, which will be ready by 15th of July. That's the go live date for that feature. So this is how GoTrust makes it easy for our end consumers in this case to adopt or connect the tool basically. So let's say a customer has a company, his structure set up on infrastructure on AWS, and then what we do is we ask for credentials, we'll put in the credentials, and then we are entering the ecosystem. Then there's one more credentials needed with we have to work with their technical team to get the second credentials with access to the data. And as soon as that has happened, that means all the we call them tasks, all the tasks are green, that means connections is through. So we are ready to scan the system. But like we said, before scanning, what is the most important and critical thing is to define the PIIs, that means the personal data. So what happens is we have, when you onboard a customer, we already have industry type, industry vertical. So it's healthcare, or it's manufacturing, or it's airlines, or it's automobile. So we already have predefined PIs, but that needs to be refined by the customer. We have to be configured by the customer that these are the PIs which we're talking about, or more or less. Once that is done, then it's click of a button, system is gonna scan. It will create first of all data catalog. It will then create the data, the map, and then the workflows basically, and the data flows basically. And this scanning can be done based on the company type. If it's fast moving FMCG, then it might be scan is done daily or weekly. If it's automotive or manufacturing, it might be done bi-weekly or monthly. So that's how the integration is happening with the businesses on the technical side. And on the business side, where our DPOs and industries and the business units are linked. On that side, we have the full tool where companies onboarded. On that side, the company is onboarded with our consultants, or you can onboard yourself basically. uh, and as soon as onboarding happens, the data which is coming out of the scan will be reflected into the risk matrix basically. And then you can check it whether it fits the risk matrix or not. And then beyond that, you go to assessments, which will be depending upon which assessments you're doing. It can be PIA, it can be LIA, it can be any of the other assessments, ISO, if you're working on ISO. So those assessments will automatically be pre-filled for you. It's more or less, we call it a suggestive text is already pre-filled. And using that, uh, we can uh, you as owner, you can take the right decisions how to mitigate the risk basically. So you have input from the automation, which is data discovery side, and you have input which is mapped to your assessments to see how good or bad assessments are for your company, and then you can mitigate the risk band basically. So that's how it's all connected. So I explained it in quite detailed, but yeah, that's how it is because the questions were quite detailed, so that's why I tried to answer them. Yeah.
Absolutely, Himanshu, and thanks. That helps. And also would like to add to that. Though ROPA as a requirement still not be called out in DPDPA, but rights of data subjects are called out. And if you have this provision of data mapping, you understand where data is, then you would be in a much better state to respond to a subject access request when it comes for a data principle or a data principle under the DPDPA. So I think that would be an additional benefit to have data maps online available with you. Himanshu, we have a couple of questions before we conclude the session. Let's go ahead and take those questions. Um, I think the first one is how to process PIA data for minors.
How to process is, I think, for us is a wrong question. I will say how to identify the PI data for minors would be a question where GoTrust can enable any organization to identify it using the data discovery tool and defining the PII. It will scan your systems and give you the output, basically whether you have minor data or not, if it is part of the PII.
And just to add on to that, from a DPDPA provision, I think while you are collecting this data, you need to make sure that you have the right privacy by design, making sure when you're collecting, those triggers are available for you so that you can identify how whether you collect minors data or not. How to process becomes a very wide question. There are multiple nuances. You need consent. You would need, even in some scenarios, you would even need parental consent.
Yep.
There are various studies that are going on for edtech especially, where there is a lot of data for children, how that information will be managed. So yeah, I think it needs to be answered in a very wider
Yeah.
context. Yeah.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Because minor data is becoming such a critical issue, whether it's India or Europe or globe, because so it is being also regulated pretty hard. So any company
Yeah.
collecting it has to make sure that first the intent should be right, why they're doing it, and then second is how they're processing it, or which vendors or sub partners they're sharing it with. So all that thing is become really really critical now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Great. Thanks, Himanshu. Last question. I think this is very focused on GoTrust, so I'll let you take it up. So, will GoTrust help us create a personal data inventories? And if so, will this be accomplished by our data mapping, data discovery connections, or by leveraging both, by leveraging internal assessments, or both?
So how GoTrust is working? GoTrust has both the angles basically. One is where you go and fill in your OPA, so you will fill your PIIs basically, which will be done by one of the business heads or departments or product owners or somebody within the company. And other side is our data discovery tool, which will be identifying and creating the data map basically for the organization. So creating the data inventories is the part of the data discovery tool. So you will get the data inventories also via the data discovery. And now when I say this, the product comes into multiple subscription. So some of the customers gonna have the full package where they have the data discovery component uh, connected to their ecosystem. So GoTrust can create data inventories for those customers. Some will only have the workflow part of it, which is ROPA, where they are filling it manually basically, and then the assessment flow is executed. So it depends upon it will be depending upon the customer and type of implementation which is you're doing, which solution will apply basically. Yeah. Mohit, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, hazards of being online, but yes. Yeah, thanks for that. And so how would you like to conclude this, the key takeaways, if you can sum it up, sum the entire session up, the key takeaways that individuals need to take away from this session, when it is related to DPDPA, what should be an organization's perspective for next 6 months? What should they do? What is the importance, and how they should approach it, if you can summarize it in these 3 points.
Okay. I think preparation is the key. So start data mapping activities. If it's not started, please plan it, make a project for it, uh, because laws are coming in, so it will become really important. Data mapping will be a critical part of the compliance, consent management, risks and integrations with data protection board will become next challenges. So if you make them part of a project, will become strategic projects, and you have to highlight them to the higher management. Otherwise, funding and the budget will not be there. So please take them up, and then tailor-made data mapping processes to fit the size and complexity of organization will be the answer. If it's big, small, medium size, and depending upon which industry you are, it's healthcare, it's more regulated. If it's not healthcare, it's different and different we're talking about. So preparation is the key. That's what I will say. So start these projects, at least initiate them within the strategic board or whichever board you're reporting to, because this is coming, and when it will come very hard if you're not prepared. Yeah. Thanks, Mohit.
Yeah, thanks, Himanshu. And um, I think that was a great session to explain what are the importance of DPDPA, and how data mapping will help you, and how this tool additionally will be in position to help you, achieve that compliance to data mapping and the overall DPDPA requirements. There are various other requirements as well, but yeah, today's focus was around data mapping. So yes, with that, I would like to thank Himanshu. Thank you very much for taking all the questions, and I would also like to thank
Thanks.
everyone who's attended the session. Great questions. I think it was a great session, and I'm sure you can reach out to Himanshu and myself as well. We are on LinkedIn. If you have any further questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them for you.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, everyone.
Any conclusion? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Varsha. We'll hand it over to you. Anything else, or we are good? I think we're good. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Mohit. Bye.